Hey friends, just wanted to get in front of you here quick and say I realize this is a pretty long video, so I made sure to include some chapter markers. The first section of the video, we're going to be talking through my previous rig and some of the other boards I've built in the past. Then in the second section, we'll get the new rig put together. And then towards the end of the video, I wanted to include some music examples of the kind of stuff I'm going to be trying to do creatively with this setup. Figure I should also throw a little disclaimer at the beginning here. I'm not affiliated with any pedal companies or distributors in any way. This is just stuff that I have collected in my 15-ish years of being a pedal enthusiast. Alright guys, so I figured I would talk through kind of the existing rig I've been using for about the last three and a half years before we kind of pull it apart and build the new rig. I really like all these pedals. I think that they're all going to make it into the new rig in some kind of iteration. But I really built this rig initially around kind of the preamp Mark II here. This is one that I got in the first round that they did in 2020-ish or whatever like that. And then in combination with the MC6, that is most of my gain sounds here. Having the MC6 enables you to get directly from any number of preset you want to any other number, so you don't have to step through them in order, which I think just makes it a lot more usable. So the signal actually comes in here at the Mythos Argo. I like to have one gain stage in front of the preamp Mark II because there are some kind of squishier sounds that I find you kind of need that extra gain stage boosting into something for. And then from there, we go out into the Keeley Super Fat mod. I typically just leave this either on or it's off, depending kind of what amp sound I'm playing into. If it's a really clean amp, I'll oftentimes have this on for just a little low-level crunch and saturation across everything. If it's a little bit more of a crunchy amp or I'm, turning up something like a Princeton, I'll usually turn this off if the amp's giving me a little bit of love. So from there, we then go into the warped vinyl. That's kind of handling all my wobbly sounds on this board. I like the way it does chorus. I like the way it does vibrato. Can get in the ballpark of univibe things enough for my taste. So I really dig this pedal. And then from there, we go into the Sonic Research Turbo Tuner Mini. I know that the LVX has a tuner built into it, but I kind of just prefer having a standalone unit for that. And I found this one to be reliable and, accurate as close as my ear can tell. So I like this one for my tuner. Then from there we go into the Cali 76. I've got this on here just because in the music I'm, making, I alternate between some very clean sounds, very fuzzed out sounds, and I feel that this kind of just helps equalize everything a little bit and keep the dynamic range, contained to a similar level overall, which I kind of like. And then from there we go out and we go to the Tensor. So this is kind of my weird pedal for the whole rig. Can do some kind of pitch shifty stuff like adding in, plus a fifth above or plus an octave. And it's also cool for reverse kind of Hendrixy squiggly sounds like that. So this has become kind of a, a go-to for me that I like to have on here. And then the LVX is basically covering all of my delay type needs. I'm definitely still learning this pedal. It's super deep, but so far I really like it. I'm not a huge reverb guy, so, I don't really need to have a standalone reverb on here. And this can get enough of those kind of washy textures when I need them that I've been, really happy working with this. Before I had the LVX on here, I had the Empress Echo System, and I really like that pedal too. But I just moved that over to synths because I find the UX of this guy's a little bit easier to customize, just in my opinion. So prior to putting this rig together in about 2020, I had a much bigger board. It was a 15 by 30 with a rolling road case. And I still have that board. We're actually going to move back onto that in this video. But the first iteration of that big rig was not especially well thought out. I'll try to throw a picture of it on the screen here somewhere, but there were a lot of pedals on that board that I would only occasionally end up using, or that were in places that were difficult to stomp on or reach. And at the time, I was also practicing in a rehearsal space and lugging the rig back to my apartment to then, record stuff at home. So that was just really heavy to be dragging back and forth all the time. And one of the major things that's changed for me in the last couple years is now I have the luxury of, working out of an extra bedroom in my house. So this doesn't really get carried around a ton, and that, you know, utility value of being light doesn't do as much for me. So I think that's one of the main reasons that I'm, you know, happy to be moving back towards a bigger board at this point. One thing that I really liked about this rig is that it forced me to be super intentional with all my pedal choices. There's not really anything on here that I don't consistently use when I sit down to, you know, play guitar, be creative, record music, whatever that might be. And I think there's a lot of value in approaching a rig from that perspective, where you really want to trim the fat back to only stuff that is consistently super useful. So I'm glad to have gone on that journey, and I can see myself potentially moving back to a rig like this if I'm in a situation where schlepping is consistently a part of my life again. That being said, more recently, a lot of my workflows, I found myself wanting to use more pedals, wanting to add a looper, wanting to add another drive out front or something, and just ending up with, you know, additional strings of pedals all over my floor under my keyboard stand here, which is not really any tidier than just having a big board where you can tie everything down and keep it organized. So that's definitely one of the reasons that I'm, you know, also looking to move back to that bigger board. Just naturally found myself wanting to use more pedals, and, you know, the schlep is not as much part of my life, so that's just not really as big of a motivating factor. So let's get all these pedals yanked off here, and then we can talk about the approach for the next iteration of the rig. All right, guys, I got the 15x30 board back up on the bench here, and I got my selection of utility pedals spread out. Over on this side, I've got some MIDI stuff, so I think I'm going to be looking to implement some global tap tempo so that I can sync multiple delays or modulations just off this unit, or I can bring in a tempo from my modular case or from a DAW and just clock the whole board off that. I think that'll be super useful. I've got a couple expression pedals here, which I'm definitely planning on incorporating just to, you know, control parameters, get back and forth between different sounds, you know, kind of on the fly while I'm playing. And then I've got some signal splitting and combining devices over here. I think that's going to be one of the main themes of how I try to build this board. Is I think I'm going to use the signal blender here to split into 3 separate paths after my drive section, and then I'm going to put the Red Panda mixer somewhere near the end of the board to re-sum stuff back together if I want to. The idea with that being that I want to run into potentially 3 different amps with 3 different signal chains, or be able to just mix them if I'm playing through a single amp and want to keep it simple. So I'm going to get the pedals from the little baby board thrown back on here in a way that kind of makes sense with a couple of these utilities, and then I'll check back in with you guys. Cool. Hey friends, so I've been working on this rig most of the afternoon today. Figured I'd give you a little update here. So I've got kind of my main front end signal path just patched up here and tested. That's all working. So we come in the Analog Man Sunbender, and then we go to the Idiot Box Power Drive, and then we go Preamp Mark II, Tuner, Warped Vinyl, Cali 76, and then into the Signal Blender. I decided to forego the Super Fat mod. And I decided to pull the Argo off there for now, although this can swap in for either of these if I feel like it in the future. The next thing I think I'm going to do is update the firmware on the LVX and get this tap tempo globally syncing to all the presets on that. And then I'm going to work on the B and A loops on the Signal Blender here. You can see I've saved a very specific size chunk of space here. That's going to be for the Hog 2. I think I'm going to put that in B, going to its own output. And then I got to decide what I'm going to do with A. I think I'm going to send A to the tensor and maybe to like the mood or some other Chase Bliss pedal, and out to its own output. So I'll have 3 separate outputs, or I can blend them with the mixer here. So that's kind of the progress as of now, guys. I think I'm going to spend the next few days or weeks kind of tinkering, trying different setups, and then I'll try to show you guys a more finished version and some music examples kind of using the different feature of this board. So yeah, see you guys when I am back with more progress. All right, so it's been a couple weeks since I recorded that last clip, and I've spent a good amount of time Tetrising stuff onto the board here. I think I've got about as much as I could fit, and I've chosen my pedals for my A and my B loops on the signal blender here. So like I said, the clean just goes to the LVX, and then the blooper, and then out. The A loop here is my hog loop, and I wanted to use a couple pedals to process the output of that, so I chose the reverse mode C, because I want to have a delay on each of my signal paths, and I really like the way that this synced with the tap tempo. I felt like it stayed really tight with the LVX if I was running multiple delays. So I'm going with reverse mode C for my delay on the hog for now, and then I went with the generation loss after that just to have some modulation options, because the hog is doing kind of pad sounds a good amount of the time, and I think that the generation loss sounds really good to kind of crunch those up a little bit more. And then my B loop here, I actually opted to swap the tensor out for the onward because I just got this pedal and I'm really digging it. I like the kind of dynamic sampler aspect of it as something a little bit different to the hog. You can do some freeze sounds here, but it's a little bit easier to do kind of chord progressions I'm finding on the onward. So I chose that as my main kind of effect for my B loop. And then it's followed by the mood. So again, I can have a delay or a reverb, and then some other weird, loopy, glitchy kind of stuff going on here to process the output of the onward. So that's where I've landed for my pedal choice for now. Let's go to some sound examples. friends, thought I'd pop in here one more time really quick to just explain the MIDI routing that I've got going on here. There's actually two separate MIDI chains that don't connect with each other at all going on here. So one of which is the Morningstar MC6 going into the Preamp Mark II, which is then connected to the Hog. And I'm just using, basically this is a preset controller for both of these units. I actually didn't initially know that you could recall Hog presets using an external controller, so that's awesome and super helpful. And then the second MIDI loop is coming off of the disaster area clock here. So that runs under into the LVX, which then goes to a Chase Bliss MIDI box, and I'm using that to break out the TRS MIDI for the reverse mode C, the onward, and the blooper right now are the pedals that I'm running off of MIDI as well. And if I want to sync that to a DAW, I just take the output of the clock, unplug it from the back of the LVX, and plug the output of my modular case or synth or whatever into the input of the LVX, and everything else follows that. So yeah, that's kind of what I've got going on for MIDI routing. I might eventually find a way to bring tempo in through the MC6 so then I could control presets over here on the LVX as well. But for now, I'm pretty happy with this because I normally am not using more than like 4 sounds on the LVX. So I've kind of got enough controls on the front plate there for the most part. So hopefully that's helpful to kind of understand what's going on with the MIDI routing. Alright guys, this video is getting pretty long, so I think I'm going to wrap it up there. But I would expect this board will continue to show up in future videos where I'm doing different music projects on the channel here. If you have any questions, throw them in the comment section below. I'll try to respond to those. Thanks for hanging out if you made it all the way to the end. Maybe give me a sub, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.